alcoholic who is 16 years clean. There's a beautiful saying that humility is a consequence of humiliation. And belonging to the addiction family, I believe that addicts are constantly bombarded with attacks on your ego. And I've experienced that during my drinking when my wife would start ranting and raving, especially on a Monday morning after my weekend escapades. I've experienced that with my own kids, speaking in a disparaging manner towards me. I've experienced that at work, where my colleagues look down upon me. It is as though your ego is under this constant attack, and it has to reach a point where I call it an ego collapse. Now, an ego collapse paves its way for a moment of clarity. Some people call it a spiritual awakening, but it makes you sit back and think about this important decision of stopping this action of drinking or using drugs or continuing down that road. And I think that this kind of event that takes place is so important that it cannot be ignored. So anybody who's been down this road of addiction most probably knows that they reach this point of crossroads where they have to make this decision, because they are faced with an impossible dilemma. Nobody wants the job. You've lost your job, you've got no money, you're out on the streets, people are treating you like dirt. And this is the point, I think, that is most important in your life as an addict. And therefore, that is why I say you cannot ignore it. You can't say that you're going to stop for one day and then eventually you go back to that self-destructive behavior. So when I cleaned my act up, I looked at the kids at school and I realized that there was a problem. I remember being a member of an organization called TADA. Most people recognize or know about TADA. And I questioned the manner in which TADA provided its services. What they did was they sent university students who knew about drug addiction, but they didn't know much about being an addict. And it just stopped there. And I felt that there was a need to explore this avenue more, to look at the behavior of kids. And I realized that I needed to start an organization where I could use my position as an educator to influence learners in order to change their behavior. Now, in any school, there is a certain kind of structure and there's a certain way in which learners behave. And this behavior comes from the way the society behaves in that particular school. And the whole aim, my whole aim, is to change the way society sees young people. It is to change the way young people see themselves. There has to be a radical change in the mindset and the thinking, which can be directed towards an intellectual way of thinking, but also a spiritual way of thinking. It has to be two-pronged. And therefore, I believe that forums like this, where we can get young people to speak and to create a forum of discussion on the way forward for young people in a particular community, I think it's very, very important. It's not for me as an adult to come here and tell you how young people should behave. It is for young people to come up and to create a discourse and create a discussion around the state of the thinking of young people. And these kinds of forum is the kind of forum that I am encouraging, and I'm trying to spread it. I'm trying to spread a philosophy. And you'll find that if I get a kid to come up and speak at assembly, especially about clean living, and especially about being involved in educational programs, this kind of talk is met with a lot of discouragement. It's met with a lot of cynicism. It's met with a lot of criticism. So it's difficult for a kid like Jordan now, who I came with, to come up and speak at assembly and tell the kids, hey, you know what, you better stop smoking. That's going to do this to you. You better stop using cough mixture. It's no good. They laugh him off. They will laugh him off. And this is a battle that young people are faced with. It's a battle that they need to overcome. It's a battle that we need to create a kind of tsunami where we're going to fight against this kind of thinking. And the idea of clean living should become the norm. The idea of thinking in an intellectual manner should become the norm. The idea that going to winter school is super important. The idea that we need to connect with our own God of understanding should be number one priority. Our young people should have a sense of God consciousness as they go along this road of clean living and sobriety. And I think that is the job that I'm trying to create at my school. I've taken my program to other schools, but I have big ideas, very, very big ideas of taking this program to all schools in KwaZulu-Natal, and also getting funding. I belong to an NGO called Gyra in Wentworth. Gyra offers free courses in N1, N2, and N3 in different engineering fields. For example, if you're interested in electronics, you can do a course in N1, 2, and 3, and that will equip a young person with the tools to get a job. So Gyra is also an organization that gets funding from the industry, and they provide this free service to the community. And this is a kind of idea we need to implant into young people, that ultimately your aim in life is to provide service to humanity. I read a beautiful book called Shades, and it said that humility is having a heart with ears, a spirit with a silent tongue, and a wisdom that gives first to others. And giving of yourself is the most powerful spiritual concept that anyone could develop in themselves. And educating young people about values like this and concepts like this, I think is very, very important. And as we, you know, as a young person develops himself and behaves in this manner, you find that this can become infectious, and this whole idea and concept can spread from school to school, and it can spread from community to community, and it can actually become a worldwide phenomenon, this kind of thinking. You know, it might seem, you know, that I'm just spouting words here, but I've worked with young people for about 12 to 13 years now, and the kids that I've worked with, I've actually seen radical change in them. I've seen powerful young people become powerful speakers. I've seen them going from strength to strength, and many of them come back to see me at school and tell me about how they're doing out there in the world. Okay, so I just want to thank you, you know, for the wonderful work you're doing here, the MSC Center. You might, you know, I heard you saying earlier on that you met with a lot of failure as well. That is what addiction is. The little success that we do have, that I do have with my young kids, I celebrate. Was last year I had a kid. I took him all the way to Port Shepstone. There's a rehab there, run mainly for young people. I don't know if you know a guy, the comedian Mutu Murugan. He's on the board of that rehab. And two educators, myself and another educator, paid for his stay in the rehab. And then I went to fetch him. Now, there was one teacher on our staff who asked me, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to fetch a learner in Port Shepstone." She said, "You crazy." No, I was crazy that I was using my money and my car and my petrol to fetch a learner. I know I was not crazy. But anyway, that kid came back and he relapsed. Now, what he used to do to get his money was he used to wait down there in Jacobs. Our school is in Wentworth, opposite the engine refinery. So he'd wait down there in Jacobs and rob our kids. And the kids just come back and tell me, "Hey, you know, it was that boy that robbed us. The same boy I sent to Rehab." And then he cleaned up his act again, and he's been clean ever since. And he comes and visits me quite often, and I can see he's putting on weight and he's looking so great. And he's one of the kids I'm going to be using as a speaker as well. So with that, I want to thank you for listening to me, and thank you very much.